So good morning everyone. I am Kristen Bacalso and I am the first reporter in Chapter 13, Group Behavior, Teams and Conflict. So my topic outline are group dynamics, definition of a group, reasons for joining groups, and factors affecting group performance. So the learning objectives in this chapter is to understand what constitutes a group and a team, learn why people join groups, know how to increase group performance, understand how teams operate, be able to decide when groups perform better than individuals, know why the team approach is not always the best, understand the causes of conflict, and lastly, know how to reduce conflict. So in reviewing the books written on group dynamics, it quickly becomes clear that there is no agreed upon definition of a group. Some experts use a general definition that basically defines a group as a two or more people who perceive themselves as a group and interact in some way. Other definitions require that a group must involve some degree of a structure and permanency. So prefer the definition used by Gordon 2001, who believes that for a collection of people to be called a group, the following four criteria must be met. First, the members of the group must see themselves as a unit. Second, the group must provide rewards to its members. Third, anything that happens to one member of the group affects every other member. And lastly, the members of the group must share a common goal. So the first criterion is that the group must have multiple members. Obviously, one person does not constitute a group even if he is a multiple personality. Therefore, at least two people are necessary to form a group. Usually, we refer to a people as a dyad, to three people as a triad, and 4 to 20 people as a small group. To be considered a group, these two or more people must also see themselves as a unit. So, for example, three individuals walking down the sidewalk would be considered a group only if they knew one another and were together. So, eight separate customers shopping at the store would not be considered a group. So, group rewards. The second group criterion is that the members must be rewarding for each individual in the group. People will join a group only if it provides form of reward. To demonstrate this point, imagine four students studying for an exam. If the four study in separate rooms and do not share information, they are not group. Likewise, consider if the same four people sat on one desk in the library. If each person studies the book separately and never communicates with the other three, then the four still will not be group because none of the individuals is rewarding by being with the others. But if none of the four would have otherwise studied independently, then the four students would be considered a group because being together was rewarding. Even though they do not talk with one another during their time in the library, the fact that they were together provided the structure for each of them to study. Corresponding effects. The third group criterion is that an event that affects one group member should affect all group members. That is, if something significant happens to one person and does not affect any of the other people gathered with her, then the collection of people cannot be considered as a group. So this requirement is called corresponding effects. For example, suppose 5 bank tellers work side by side and one teller becomes ill and goes home. If the activities of the other four change as a result of one teller leaving, the five must be considered a group. But if the activities of the other four do not change after one teller leaves, then the tellers cannot be considered a group. Common goals. The fourth and the final criterion is that all members must have a common goal. A common goal is an aim or a purpose shared by members of a group. So in the teller example, if the goal of one of the tellers is to meet only young, single customers and the goal of another teller is to serve as many customers as possible, the tellers are not considered to be a group because they work in different ways and for different reasons. So there are 8 reasons for joining groups. First is assignment, physical proximity, affiliation, identification, emotional support, assistance or help, common interests, and lastly, common goals. So assignment. In the workplace, the most common reason for joining groups is that employees are assigned to them. For example, a new employee might be assigned to a department with 5 other employees, and five employees might be appointed to serve on a committee, and 10 employees are scheduled for the same training class. Next is physical proximity. One especially strong reason that a person might join a particular group, especially if the group is informal, is if physical proximity. That is, people tend to form groups with people who either live or work nearby. For example, at work, employees tend to form groups that consist of those who work in the same general area. And some people seek close physical proximity to people in power, hoping they will become part of an elite group. So the bomber wing provides an interesting example of how physical proximity can create an unlikely group. The bomber wing was a small section of the federal maximum security prison in Florence, Colorado, whose 1,999 residents included Ted Kaczynski, the unbomber, and Ramsey Youssef, the World Trade Center bomber, and Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. Though the three had access to one another for only 2 hours a week and had to shout across the hall to communicate, they formed quiet the social group. Without this proximity, it is unlikely that the three would ever have belonged to the same group. So affiliation. Affiliation involves our need to be with other people. So affiliation is a leadership style in which the individual leads by caring about others, and that is most effective in a climate of anxiety. So thus one reason people join groups is to be near and talk to other people, and research has demonstrated that our need for affiliation is very strong. So, groups can fulfill social needs. People enjoy the regular interaction that comes with group members. For many people, on the job interactions are their primary means of fulfilling their needs for affiliation. People are not equal in their desire or need to affiliate with others, according to Ray and Hall 1995. So it is important to consider the need for affiliation and the negative consequences of isolation, given such trends as having employees work from home and sending employees to work in different countries. Next is identification. Another reason we join groups is to uh, our desire for identification with some group or cause. So identification is the need to associate ourselves with the image of projected by other people, groups, or objects. So some people can join certain groups to project certain identities. So people usually buy branded clothes in order to project a certain identity to others. For example, of the identification process comes from a major manufacturing plant in Virginia. Several months before union contract talks began, the company gave each employee several nice shirts with the company name printed on the front. The company did this because it had previously noticed that in the months before contract negotiations began, the employees began to wear more union caps and shirts. So the company believed that this clothing helped increase the employees' level of identification with the union. To counter this effect, the company hoped that its shirts would influence the negotiation process. So emotional support. We also join groups to obtain emotional support. So Alcoholic Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, and Weight Watchers are good examples of groups that provide emotional support for their members. So a quick perusal of ads in the local paper or quick surfing of the internet will demonstrate the importance of this need, as there are hundreds of different types of support groups. So it is social support that builds people during times of stress and often gives them the strength to carry on and even thrive. But social support is certainly not a one-way street. In addition to relying on others, you also serve as a form of support for many people in your life. Next is assistance or help. People often join groups to obtain assistance or help. For example, students have problems with an algebra class might form a study group. So students came to realize that they learn more effectively when they are work in groups. Next is the common interest. People often join groups because they share a common interest. So at school, students joining a geology club share an interest in geology. So another example is a service club in the Radford University campus was having difficulty attracting members. So several advisors suggested that it is increase its numbers of social activities to attract people who had both community service and social needs. Some groups are formed to pursue goals that are common interest to group members. So by joining together, individuals can pursue group goals that are typically not feasible alone. Common goals. The last reason for joining groups. So people who join political parties exemplify being in pursuit of a common goal. These people may also share common interests, but their primary purpose is to get a particular person or members of a particular party elected to office. So people may join groups for goal achievement when it takes more than one person's talents, knowledge, or power to complete the job. The stated goal can be achieved easily. So interests and goals which are common and require cooperation with others for achievement of such goals are powerful force behind such group formation. For example, within an organization, the salesmen form a group. Even though these salesmen have individual goals, their organizational goal is common. So it is formed to achieve some common goals. Goals are the concerns of all members. So achievement of a goal is a reason why individuals form a group, and they share their ideas and interests to accomplish the shared goals. So let's proceed to the factors affecting group performance. We have group cohesiveness, group homogeneity, stability of membership, isolation, outside pressure, group size, group status, group ability and confidence, personality of the group members, communication structure, and group roles. So group cohesiveness. Group cohesiveness is the extent to which group members like and trust one another, are committed to accomplishing a team goal, and share a feeling of group pride. So in general, the more cohesive the group, the greater its performance to the productivity and efficiency, decision quality, member satisfaction, member interaction, and employee courtesy. So group cohesiveness refers to a group commitment towards staying together resulting from the forces operating on members to do so. The forces responsible for cohesiveness are attraction to the group, motivation to stay in the group, and resistance to leave the group. If the group is composed of homogeneous individuals, has reached maturity in its development, its size is not very large, interactions among its members are frequent, its goals are clear, there is competition with outsiders or threats from external factors, is concerned about effectiveness with regard to reaching the goal, enhanced cohesiveness of groups. High levels of cohesiveness lead to goal accomplishment, job satisfaction, improved interaction, and synergy. As opposed to this, group cohesiveness will be low if the group is heterogeneous in composition, newly formed, large in size, and its members are dispersed physically, its are ambiguous or have failed in reaching its goals. So low levels of group cohesiveness leads to problems and difficulties in attaining goals. More chances of the group getting broken down, decrease in interactions, orientation towards self rather than the group, and reduced commitment to group goals. So next is the group homogeneity. So the group homogeneity is the extent to which its members are similar. A homogeneous group contains members who are similar in some or most ways, or groups whose members share the same characteristics, whereas a heterogeneous group contains members who are more different than alike, or group whose members share few similarities. Of course, the difficulty in determining the homogeneity of a group comes from the many ways in which people are different. Group members might be demographically similar, example, age, gender, or race, but be very different in personality, attitudes, values, and competencies. An important question for a leader to consider when developing a group is which composition, homogeneous or heterogeneous, will lead to the best group performance. So many researchers studies have sought to answer this question, but only mixed results have been found, with some studies finding homogeneous groups most effective and other finding heterogeneous groups most effective according to Bowers and Palmer, Salas 2000. Stability of membership. The greater the stability of the group, the greater the cohesiveness. Thus, groups in which members remain for long periods of time are more cohesive and perform better than groups that have high turnover. And groups whose members have previously worked together perform better than groups whose members are not familiar with one another. So, stability is the extent to which the membership of a group remains consistent over time. So, a good example again can be found on the college campus. So, at most colleges, fraternities and sororities usually are the most active organization and high levels of performance. Professional clubs and honorary societies such as Psi Chi and Lambda Alpha Beta tend to be the least active. So why is this? Certainly, it cannot be the abilities of the members. Honorary societies have members with higher IQs than do most fraternities and sororities. Instead, the answer might be in the stability of the groups. Students tend to join in Greek organization in their freshman or sophomore years, whereas students tend to join professional clubs in their junior year and honorary societies in their senior year, often to have pads in their resume. So the Greek organization does have more stable memberships than the other organization. So isolation. Physical isolation is another variable that tends to increase a group's cohesiveness. Groups that are isolated or located away from other groups tend to be highly cohesive. Isolation is the degree of physical distance of a group from the other groups. So outside pressure. Outside pressure is the amount of psychological pressure placed on a group by people who are not members of the group. Groups that are pressured by outside forces tend to become highly cohesive. To some degree, this response to outside pressure can be explained by the phenomenon of psychological reactance, according to Brehm 1966. When we believe that someone is trying to intentionally influence us to take some particular action, we often react by doing the opposite. Consider, for example, a teenage dating couple. As the boy arrives to pick up his date, the girl's father notices the young man's bird and Harley Davidson motorcycle and forbid his daughter to go out with him. Before this order, the daughter may not have been especially interested in the boy, but after being told she cannot go on the date, she reacts by liking the boy more. Group size. Groups are most cohesive and perform best when group size is small. Studies have shown that the large groups have lower productivity, less coordination, and lower morale, and are less active, less cohesive, and more critical than smaller groups. So, in fact, research suggests that groups perform best and have greatest member satisfaction when they consist approximately 5 members. Thus, a large organization probably works best when it's divided into smaller groups and committees and when work groups contain approximately 5 people. This does not mean, however, that small groups are always best. Although small groups usually increase cohesiveness, high performance is seen with only certain types of tasks. These certain types of tasks are additive tasks, conjunctive tasks, disjunctive tasks, and the social impact theory. So first is additive tasks are those for which the group's performance is equal to the sum of performances by each group member. Examples of groups performing additive tasks include bowling teams and typing pools. In groups working on additive tasks, each member's contribution is important, and larger groups will probably be better than smaller groups. Second, the conjunctive tasks are those for which the group's performance depends on the least effective group member. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Examples of conjunctive tasks include an assembly line and friends going hiking. You can walk only as fast as the slowest hiker. Because success on a conjunctive task is limited by the least effective member, smaller groups are usually best. Third, disjunctive tasks are those for which the group's performance is based on the most talented group member. Examples of disjunctive tasks include problem solving, brainstorming, and a captain's choice golf tournament. Each person plays the best shot of the four golfers. As with additive tasks, the larger groups are probably better at disjunctive tasks than are smaller. Lastly, the addition of more members has its greatest effect when the group is small. So, first investigate this idea when he formulated social impact theory by Latain. Imagine that a four-person committee is studying safety problems at work. If the group is stable and cohesive, adding a fifth person may be disruptive. Disruptive. Group status. The higher the group status, the greater its cohesiveness. This is an important point. A group can be made more cohesive by increasing group status. The group does not actually have to have high status, but it is important that its members believe they have high status. So the term status refers to the relative ranking that a person holds in a group. Status is determined in the context of comparison. So therefore, status defines the rank of an individual relative to others in the organization and the group. So status is in fact defined in terms of rights, privileges, duties, and obligations the individual holds in an organization. It is an important factor in understanding human behavior. When an individual perceives a disparity between his status with that of other group's members, it creates disequilibrium that results in interpersonal conflicts. So, what is important for the group members is to believe that the status is hierarchy is equitable and just. Next is group ability and confidence. Not surprisingly, groups consisting of high ability members outperform those with low ability members. Furthermore, groups whose members believe that their team can be successful both at a specific task, high team efficacy. High team efficacy constitutes the joint beliefs of team members in their team capacity to mobilize team effort. So if organization wish to boast team efficacy, they must build strong teams who have gained effective teams behavior skills. Efficacy is positively related to team performance. And a task in general, high team potency. A high team potency is the belief that shared by team members that their group is effective at achieving assigned results according to Gusu et al. 1993. Um, it performed better than groups whose members aren't as confident about their probability for success. So, personality of the group members. An important factor affecting group performance is the quality of the group members. Meta analysis results indicate that in general, groups whose members have task related experience and score high in the personality dimensions of openness to experience and emotional stability will perform better than groups whose members do not have these characteristics, according to Bell 2007. In addition, groups working on intellectual tasks will do better if their group's members are bright, and groups working on physical tasks, for example, sports team, will do better if the group members score high in the personality dimension of conscientiousness, extroversion, and agreeableness according to Bell 2005. Next is the communication structure. Communication structure is the manner in which members of a group communicate with one another. Another variable that can affect groups' performance is its communication structure, or it is a network. For a group to perform successfully, good communication among members is essential. So as shown in the figure, this is a possible communication networks for small groups. A variety of communication networks can be used for um, by small groups, and even more complex networks are possible with larger groups. So each network has its advantages and disadvantages. But the best networks depend on the situations and goals of their groups. For example, if the goals of fraternities and single clubs are those encourage members to get to know one another, then a centralized structure will be less conducive than a completely open one. Conversely, if the goal of the group is to solve a problem as quickly as possible, then the centralized network will be the best structure. So, a good leader carefully chooses the communication network that best facilitates the goals of his groups. And lastly, the group roles. Another factor that affects the performance of a group is the extent to which its members assume different roles. All members of a group are expected to play specific roles. By this term, we mean a set of expected behavior patterns attributed to someone occupying a given position in a social unit. Quite often, this role is often um, a function of the individual's job description. A role is consists of a patterns of norms. It is a position that can be acted out by an individual. The content of a given role is prescribed by the prevailing norms. Role can be defined mm, as a position that has expectation evolving from established norms. The main issue is that a person is required to play a number of roles, and the behavior varies with the role he is playing. Different groups impose different role requirements on individuals. When we examine the concept of role in depth, it becomes obvious that there are different types of roles. For a group to be successful, its members' roles must fall into two categories: task oriented and the social oriented. And a third category is the individual role, includes blocking groups' activities, calling attention to oneself, and avoiding group interaction. Individual roles seldom results in higher group productivity. The task-oriented roles involves behaviors such as offering new ideas, coordinating activities, and finding new information. The social-oriented roles involves encouraging cohesiveness and participation. Um, Group members will often naturally assume these rules on the basis of their individual personalities and experiences. For example, people high in conscientiousness tend to fill task oriented roles, and people high in agreeableness tend to fill social oriented roles. Um, when roles are not naturally filled by groups members, leaders must assign rules to certain individuals. For example, if a leader notices that every group member is filling a task oriented role, she may either recruit a new group member or assign a current member to fill a social role. So that's it for my report. Thank you for listening.